Welcome back to Sports Talk ATL. I'm Chase Earl, joined by Alex Lord. The Quin Snyder era in Atlanta has begun, and unfortunately for Hawks fan, it hasn't begun like we all had hoped. I know a lot of people thought you fire Nate, you get a good coach in there, it's going to change overnight. I know it's only been 4 games, but I don't think it's. I said it before it was happening that it wasn't going to change as much as we all thought. And when you look at the problems that are arising over the first 4 games, it's the same stuff. Terrible defense, blowing fourth quarter leads. AJ Griffin is now no longer even part of the rotation, which is kind of crazy. John Collins has experienced severe regression, and it wasn't just because of Nate McMillan. He is not as good as he was, and that's not going to change with Quin Snyder. I'm not saying he can't get better and return because I don't. I think it's more of a confidence issue. But he right now is not as the same player he has been over the last 3 years for the Hawks. And all those things weren't going to just change because a new man walked in the building and started talking. I always thought that was a silly idea. And I think we're getting a glimpse of, the problems this Hawks teams have, which aren't fixable overnight with just a head coach.
Yeah, I think Hawks fans were just a little bit too optimistic. I said it multiple times. Let's just be cautiously optimistic about it all. I'd rather be optimistic than pessimistic. That's just me when it comes to sports, at least. And yeah, it's just the same Hawks team with a better looking coach. That's all it is. And I think that the in-season hire was really just a head start on the off season. Get Quin Snyder in there, let him get a feel for the team, for the players, the personnel, see who needs to stay, who needs to go, what he thinks he can do, what he needs to do this offseason. So I think that's what we're getting right now. And I'll say this, there have been minor adjustments. The rotations have been a little bit different. The Hawks are taking less jump shots. They're taking more at the basket and behind the three-point line. So that's encouraging at least. But it's still the same old thing. Trae Young had some bad decision-making last night. And then, that really hasn't changed. That's all he's been doing. It's kind of discouraging. We're in this, he's trying to turn the corner as turning into a veteran almost. He's no longer that young kid who can continually make these mistakes. He needs to be the point guard. He needs to be that Chris Paul-esque kind of guy that controls the game. And he's just not turned into that guy. With all that being said, all these negatives, and there's plenty to point out, trust me, we could still be optimistic towards the future and believe that Quin Snyder, the mad scientist, can turn this thing around. You spoke on John Collins, and there's no beating around the bush. He's been terrible. And it's crazy because the guy didn't forget how to play basketball. Nobody disagrees that the guy wasn't one of the most efficient power forwards in the league a couple years ago. His role is diminished, and he just hasn't taken it as well as we hoped. Let's just be honest, though. I mean, it's not just the shooting or the scoring. It's, the defense hasn't been there. And that was a point last year and the year before that where I was like, he's a good defender. He's regressed in that facet of his game too. I believe that will be Quin Snyder's most difficult challenge is getting Trae Young and DeJounte to play together, but also accentuating John Collins' skill set best. That'll be his hardest task because right now I don't see it. And, the system hasn't been put in place. They're kind of just running mishmash, a combination of what they had been running and a little bit of new stuff that they feel that, Quin Snyder probably hasn't put that much in, but he's just like, hey, you do this well, try this. So I don't think nobody should be discouraged by this result. I think the season was always going to be a wash.
Yeah, I think I'm actually not pessimistic on Quin Snyder one bit, and these 4 games aren't going to change it. I actually think it was a great hire. I think he has a chance to really do some good things. I totally agree with you on the fact that this in-season hire, this is kind of a good, warm up to the players, do that kind of stuff, figure out who you like, what you don't like, what everyone's roles are, what kind of changes you can make in the offseason to improve. I am 100% on board with you. I just was never optimistic about what was going to happen this year. I thought it was silly to just sit there and blame Nate and think that this roster was all of a sudden going to be fixable with a head coach coming in season. I thought that was a total joke. And I think we're going to find out that it is a total joke, and we've seen it early, but they could still make a run at the end of the season. I could be wrong, but I just don't believe that's going to happen. I'm not pessimistic on the outlook of Quin Snyder in the long run. I am pessimistic on the Hawks simply because of who's in charge, and that's the wrestlers. And I've said that time and time again. And Tony Wrestler coming out this past week to ESPN and 92.9 The Game, basically putting all the blame on Travis Schlenk, who's one of the better GMs, if not the best GM this organization has had, in constructing a roster, responsible for really the only Eastern Conference Finals team that we've had that was actually competitive in the Eastern Conference Finals. Putting all the blame on him, lying to us about him being willing to go into the luxury tax, which is now like the umpteenth time he's lied about that stuff. I think that's really where my pessimism lies in the long-term outlook. It has nothing to do with Quin Snyder. I do think he's an upgrade over McMillan. I do think Landry Fields and Kyle Korver could very well be good front office members, but I don't believe him for a second when he says they have full autonomy to make the decisions. They're the guys in charge, yada, yada. I just think he's, in my opinion, he's straight up lying to us. And I think outside of me not trusting him as a basketball general manager, which he's proven to be very bad at, I don't trust him, as a human being. So that's what I'm most discouraged about when it comes to this organization.
Yeah, you and me agree both. I mean, it's nearly impossible to win a championship in any professional sport when your owner is literally holding you back. You'll never find a championship team with a bad owner. You really won't. It starts at the top and it permeates throughout the organization. And if it's, a cancer, a virus up at the top, guess what? It's going to be bad, guys. And Jeff Schultz put out an article interviewing Tony Wrestler, and it was the last one. So Tony Wrestler went on a media run to kind of try to save face, basically. And he held the Jeff Schultz for last. And Schultz held his feet to the fire. And this guy's a rat. He started cussing. He started getting, emotional and angry. And I am the last person to, make somebody, because I'm emotional and I'm reckless sometimes. But I would have loved to have been in that room and listen to Jeff Schultz grill him, because I want to see the facial expressions of Tony Wrestler. And that would tell me everything. Reading the transcript, I think he's lying. About everything. He forced the Kevin Huerter trade. He's afraid to go in the luxury tax. He doesn't give all these guys It's just crazy, and he's the problem.
Yeah, and that's why I'm pessimistic, and that's why when I said all this stuff, earlier, like people want to say, "Oh, you're a Hawks hater. You're just this, you're that." I'm like, no, man. Like I've watched this team for 15 straight years and been there when the Hawks were coming up as an 8 seed with Al Horford, and I saw the excitement, and I've been hype on this team ever since. But I don't believe in the guys in charge, and when you don't believe in the guys in charge, it's hard to think that this team's ever going to turn it around. I think it would be foolish to believe that. So yeah, I'm not pessimistic about Snyder. I'm pessimistic about the organization as a whole, and that starts with Tony Wrestler. And it ends with him too. If he would just take his hands off, let the guys who he hired do their jobs, I think things could turn around. And I don't think it would take much. But frankly, I don't trust him. And we can call him a liar, whatever you want to call him. I don't trust him. I don't believe a word out of his mouth. And I don't know why any Hawks fans would, based on the moves that we made throughout the season. Not only did we cut costs at the trade deadline. We cut costs at all these different areas simply to remain below the luxury tax. So why are we doing that? I know a GM isn't sitting there telling you to do that. Why would the GM do that? Why would the GM actively try to make the team worse to go below the luxury tax when his job is tied to the results? That doesn't make any sense. The GM wouldn't do that. So that's what's most frustrating to me about this team. And it's going to continue being frustrating until I see a change. And until I see a change, there's no reason for me to believe this organization is going to turn it around.
You nailed it. Open up your checkbook and sit back, Wrestler. Let the guys that you hired do their job. It's that simple.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we see that over the couple years, or we're in for another rebuild.